Why ruin two lives when we can ruin yours? That's basically what my dad said when he told me his parents wanted him to take the blame for a hit and run my sister caused. When I refused to go along with it, they cut me off completely. Imagine standing in a police station, your whole world caving in, only to have your own parents look you dead in the eye and beg you to sacrifice absolutely everything. Your freedom, your future, your very identity, for the sake of your sister's crime. That night, I learned a brutal truth. Some families value appearances over honesty, and some lives, apparently, are just worth less than others. The air in that precinct was thick, heavy with the stale smell of burnt coffee and unspoken despair. My hands trembled in my lap as I sat across from Detective Mercer, acutely aware of the silent, impenetrable wall my parents had built around Scarlett, my younger sister. Her mascara had run, streaking black rivers down her already flawless cheeks, making her look almost angelic in her fragile grief. My mother's fingers constantly stroked Scarlett's hair, whispering calming words I'd never once heard directed at me. Someone needs to take responsibility for this. Detective Mercer's voice sliced through the tension, his gaze flicking between us. The evidence suggests one of you was behind the wheel during the hit and run. Mrs. Evelyn Parker is in critical condition. Then my father stepped forward. He wore a mask I knew all too well, the one he donned when making cold, calculated business decisions, assessing costs and benefits with ruthless precision. "Officer," he began, his voice smooth and controlled, "my daughters are here to cooperate fully. We just need a moment to discuss this as a family." They escorted me into a small, antiseptic side room. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow over everything. Scarlett collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands, her sobs echoing against the sterile walls. My mother rushed to her, cradling her as if she were still 6 years old, not 24. Then my father turned to me. His look is branded into my mind. I can still see it when I close my eyes. "Claire Bennett," he said, his voice flat, devoid of all emotion. "We need you to tell them you were driving." The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the breath from my lungs. "What? No." Scarlett was driving. I wasn't even in the car. My voice was a frantic, choked whisper. My mother spoke without looking at me. "Your sister has a whole life ahead of her. She's just been accepted into graduate school. James wants to marry her. She's going to do something meaningful with her life." The insinuation hung in the air like toxic gas. "Unlike you." I'd heard it 1,000 times throughout my life, in every subtle gesture, every dismissive look. "This is ridiculous." I wasn't there. "The truth will come out," I pleaded, turning to Scarlett, hoping she'd speak up, tell them this was insane. She only sobbed harder, her face still hidden. My father's voice dropped, taking on that chilling tone he used when closing difficult negotiations, knowing he held all the cards. "You are 29 years old, Claire Bennett. You work in a supermarket. You live in a studio apartment. You've never done anything noteworthy with your opportunities. Scarlett wouldn't survive jail," Mom said, finally meeting my gaze. Her eyes were cold, assessing. "Look at her. She's delicate. She's sensitive. But you're stronger. You've always been the tough one." "What are you talking about?" The words spilled out before I could stop them, revealing the hidden reality that had defined every family dynamic for as long as I could remember. My mother flushed, but she didn't deny it. "You're being theatrical. This is about practicality. Scarlett has opportunities that you will never have. Why waste two futures when we only have to waste one?" Something inside me solidified in that instant. Hard, cold, and utterly clear. When I looked at the woman who gave birth to me, I saw a stranger, someone who had calculated my worth and deemed it negligible. "Your responsibility, as the older sister," Dad instructed, his tone condescending. "For once in your life, contribute to this family." I walked out of that room without saying another word. My legs felt like lead, but my back was ramrod straight. I told Detective Mercer the entire truth. Every agonizing detail. Scarlett had called me that night, distraught, begging me to come to the station for help. She'd been driving intoxicated when she hit Mrs. Evelyn Parker in a crosswalk and panicked. Our parents had arrived before me, already orchestrating their horrific scheme. The look on my mother's face as I spoke drove me through everything that followed. My hands shook as I answered the detective's questions, but my voice remained steady. He was patient, methodical, meticulously noting every detail. Through the glass of the interview room, I saw my parents' faces contorted with rage. Dad paced like a caged beast. Mom had her arm around Scarlett, who had slumped again, no longer sobbing, but glaring at me with absolute loathing. "Let me make sure I understand," Detective Mercer said, reviewing his notes. "Your sister called you around 11:53 p.m. and asked you to meet her at the station. She didn't explain why over the phone." "No," I said, wrapping my arms around myself, feeling cold despite the tight air. "She just kept saying she needed me, that something bad had happened. I thought she'd been attacked or robbed." She sounded so scared. "And when you arrived, your parents were already here, and they took Scarlett to a private room first?" "Yes," I affirmed, the memory making my stomach churn. "When I finally went in, Dad immediately began detailing their plan. They'd already made all their decisions. They just needed me to agree." Detective Mercer put down his notepad and studied me with a look I couldn't decipher. "Miss Claire Bennett, what you are doing takes courage. The hardest cases are often family-related." "They're no longer my family," I heard myself say, and as the words left my mouth, they felt truer than anything I'd ever uttered. The detective excused himself to confer with his colleagues. I remained alone in that room for 50 minutes, watching the clock tick by as my old life faded away, second by torturous second. Through the glass, I saw my parents gesticulating wildly. Dad's face was flushed with fury. A uniformed officer stood between them and the interview room door, clearly keeping them from bursting in. When Detective Mercer returned, he was accompanied by another officer, a woman with kind eyes who introduced herself as Sergeant Rebecca Hayes. She sat across from me with a gentle smile. "We're going to need you to give a formal statement," she said. "Everything you remember from the phone call, the timeline, what your parents said to you. Can you do that?" I swallowed. My throat felt tight, but my resolve was hardening into something stronger than diamond. They had made their decision about who I was. Now, I was making mine. The formal statement took another 2 hours and 15 minutes. They made me repeat things multiple times, looking for inconsistencies. I knew what they were doing, and it only solidified my conviction that I was telling the truth, not spinning some malicious fiction born of sibling rivalry. "Has there been any recent tension between you and your sister?" Sergeant Hayes asked. I admitted there had always been tension, but not necessarily fighting. More like she existed in the light, and I lived in her shadow. That was just how our family operated. "Could you elaborate?" I took a deep breath, trying to articulate dynamics that had always been. Scarlett was the beautiful one, the smart one, the one with potential. I was just there. My parents made that clear in 1,000 little ways. Better clothes for her, fancier birthday parties, more focus on her interests. I learned to become invisible. That must have been painful. It was just normal, I explained, a bitter laugh escaping me. At least I thought it was. Maybe every family has a scapegoat and a favored child. I just happened to be born into the wrong role. Sergeant Hayes and Detective Mercer exchanged an unreadable glance. She took a few more notes before continuing. "Is this the first time they've asked you to make a sacrifice for your sister?" The question opened a floodgate. Memories, despite their age, came rushing back, vivid and stinging. "I was 16 when I got my first job," I explained slowly. "Bagging groceries at the downtown market. I saved every penny for over a year to go on a school trip to Washington, D.C. It cost $950. Did you go?" "No." 10 days before the trip, Scarlett's car broke down. She was 18, just got her license. Dad explained the family couldn't afford both the repair and my trip. He used my savings to fix her car. The old hurt felt distant, as if it had happened to someone else. Scarlett went to prom in that car. I looked at the school trip photos on Facebook. "Did your parents pay you back?" They said I was selfish for asking. Said family required sacrifice. I told them about our college fund, which had existed until Scarlett decided she wanted to go to an expensive private university. My savings had been siphoned into hers. I'd been told community college was perfectly suitable for someone with my grades. I recounted how I'd won a regional painting competition in high school, the only thing I'd ever been truly good at. My parents had missed the award ceremony because it clashed with Scarlett's volleyball match. Mom hadn't even looked up from cooking dinner when I came home with my award and $75 prize. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she'd replied absently. "Can you set the table? We're eating early because Scarlett has practice." The ribbon disappeared into a drawer. Scarlett's volleyball trophies adorned the mantel. Why didn't you leave? Sergeant Hayes inquired. Once you were 19, you could have walked away. Where would I go? Even I thought the question sounded naive. I had no money, no car, no support system. And a part of me kept believing that if I just tried harder, did better, proved myself in some way, they'd eventually see me. But tonight, I met her gaze squarely. Tonight, I finally understand. They will never see me. Not in the way I needed them to. They regarded me as expendable. So, I'm getting rid of them instead. The original story had a subscribe line, here which I will omit as per instructions about not embedding platform/SEO keywords. After I concluded my statement, they told me to wait while they interrogated my sister. I sat in a different room, nursing horrible coffee from a vending machine and watching the minutes tick away on the wall clock. It was after 3:18 in the morning. A victim advocate, whose name I don't recall, came to check on me. She was young, perhaps just a few years older than myself, with weary eyes that said she had seen too much. Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? She asked. The question hadn't even occurred to me. I have an apartment. Will your parents know how to find you? Of course they would. They'd arrive, full of fury and blame. The thought made me feel sick. I can connect you with resources, the advocate said, handing me a card, counseling services and temporary housing. What you are going through is a type of familial trauma. I took her card, but knew I wasn't going to call. I handled it the same way I managed everything else. Alone, silently, and without asking for aid that might not come. Detective Mercer found me about 4:45 a.m. He looked tired, yet satisfied. Your sister confessed. The evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera footage, paint transfer on her car, and her own blood alcohol test taken tonight. Her story kept shifting, but she finally admitted to everything. Relief surged through me so strongly that I felt dizzy. What will happen now? She will be formally charged. Given the seriousness of the offenses, DUI, hit and run, leaving the scene of an injury accident, she faces significant prison time. Your testimony will be vital during the trial. I'll be there, I promised. Whatever you need. He looked at me for a moment. Your parents are still inside the building. If you wish to avoid them, we can take you out by the rear entrance. I considered this, then shook my head. I'll walk out the front. I'm not hiding anymore. They waited in the lobby. Dad stood with his arms folded, his face like a thundercloud. Mom sat slumped on a plastic chair, looking hollowed out, as if she'd aged a decade in one night. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen. She was most likely already processed and being held for arraignment. Dad's gaze fixed on me with a ferocity that would have terrified a younger me. You've destroyed this family. You destroyed it yourself. I replied, my voice cool and steady. When you decided one daughter was worth more than the other, I just refused to go along with it. Mom finally looked up, her voice a whisper. She's your sister. How could you do this to her? She is a drunk driver who left someone to die on the street. How could you defend her? Your parents. Mom's voice trembled. After everything we had done for you. Like what? The question came out harsher than I had hoped, fueled by years of buried resentment. You fed me and gave me a room. That is the bare minimum of parental obligation, not a debt I owe you. Dad moved closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. If you walk out that door, you're dead to us. No more family, no more support. You will have nothing. I smiled, and I could see it unnerved him. It wasn't a joyful smile, but one of profound, liberating truth. I already have nothing from you. I responded, staring him straight in the eye. At least now I'm free. I moved past them, into the early morning darkness. The sky was just starting to lighten at the edges, that deep bruised blue that precedes dawn. My car was alone in the parking lot, and I drove home through vacant streets, feeling lighter than I had in years. The next weeks were a blur of court hearings, paperwork, and increasingly furious messages from my parents. They hired a lawyer who tried to undermine my testimony, portraying me as a jealous, vengeful sister who had fabricated evidence out of spite. The traffic camera evidence rendered that scenario implausible, but they still tried. Then, Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family contacted the prosecutor's office, asking if they could meet with me. I consented, terrified of facing the woman whose life my sister had nearly taken. Mrs. Evelyn Parker was in a wheelchair when I met her. Her daughter, Natalie Parker, gently wheeled her into the victim services office where we'd agreed to meet. She was smaller than I expected, with gray hair and trembling hands, yet her eyes were keen and compassionate. "You're Claire Bennett," she said, studying my face. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "Neither do you," I said, then quickly regretted my bluntness. But she laughed, a sound like rustling leaves. "I like honesty. Sit down, dear. Let's talk." We spent 2 hours together. She described the accident from her perspective. Crossing the street after her book club meeting, the unexpected impact, waking up in the hospital, unable to move her legs, months of physical rehabilitation, financial ruin, and nightmares that still woke her at 3:18 a.m. "I'm so sorry," I offered, feeling as if I could somehow apologize for my sister's actions. "You didn't do this," Mrs. Evelyn Parker stated firmly. "And according to the police, you're the only one in your family who tried to make it right. Your parents actually approached my daughter. Did you know that?" I felt my blood turn cold. "What?" Natalie Parker took out her phone and showed me a saved voicemail. My father's distinct voice echoed around the small space. "Hello, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. This is Robert Ashford. I am phoning to negotiate a settlement. My daughter committed a terrible mistake, but she's young and has a long future ahead of her. I'm willing to pay significant cash if you're willing to speak with the prosecution about lowering the charges." He had tried to buy her silence. I shouldn't have been surprised, but I still was. "I told him to go to hell," Natalie Parker said simply. "Your sister nearly killed my mother and drove away. No amount of money changes that." Mrs. Evelyn Parker reached over and clasped my hand with trembling fingers. "But you spoke the truth. In a family that clearly prioritizes image over integrity, you chose the right thing. That requires a level of guts that most people never have to find." Her words stuck with me through the trial, through my sister's 5-year sentence, and through my parents' final cruel text informing me I was no longer their daughter. Scarlett was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. Mom and Dad hired the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Traffic cameras, paint samples, and testimony from a jogger who witnessed the entire incident. My sister's blood alcohol level had nearly doubled the legal limit. I packed up my studio apartment the day after the sentencing. My phone rang constantly with calls from my parents, which I directed to voicemail. The messages became increasingly nasty as they realized I wasn't going to respond. The first one from Mom was almost conciliatory. "Claire Bennett, we need to discuss this. You have made your point." By the sixth, her genuine sentiments had surfaced. "You ruined your sister's life out of spite. I knew you were envious of her, but I never imagined you'd be so cruel." Dad's messages focused on realism. "Scarlett's actions were wrong, but your stubbornness has cost this family hundreds of thousands of dollars in legal fees. Your sister's future is wrecked. I hope you can live with it." I could. I slept better than I had in years. I relocated to Portland, 3 states distant from my family in Ohio. I enrolled at community college, using the money I'd earned from working extra shifts at the grocery store. The plan had always existed, hidden behind years of their low expectations and my own resigned acquiescence. Now, nothing could stop me. My academic supervisor, Dr. Allison Walsh, was the first person to truly see my potential. She became very interested in my placement tests as she studied them. "Have you ever considered majoring in computer science? These analytical results are extraordinary." I barely finished high school, I confessed, acknowledging that my family had always believed I wasn't college material. Dr. Walsh took off her spectacles and studied me with keen brown eyes. "Your family was mistaken. I've been doing this for 28 years. You have aptitude." Those words altered everything. I plunged myself into my studies with feverish concentration. Programming languages made more sense to me than anything else. There were laws, logic, and problems with clear answers. Work yielded results. Effort mattered. The first semester was terrible. I had been out of school for 11 years, and my study skills were almost non-existent. Everything my peers seemed to know instinctively. How to take notes, prepare for exams, manage multiple deadlines. I had to learn by trial and error. I failed my first programming midterm. After that, I sat in my car and cried for 25 minutes, convinced my parents had been right all along. Then, I wiped my eyes, went to Dr. Walsh's office hours, and asked for help. She didn't sugarcoat it. "You've fallen behind. Your fundamentals are weak. But you're also one of the most driven students I've met. Determination can accomplish a lot." She connected me with a tutor, a doctoral student named Kevin O'Connor, who was infinitely patient with my dumb questions. We met 4 times a week in the library, working through problems until the concepts finally clicked. Slowly, gradually, I started to understand. I earned a B on my third midterm. I got an A on my final exam. Kevin O'Connor gave me a high five after the grades were released. "Do you know what the difference was?" he said, his eyes shining. "You stopped being afraid of making mistakes. You just kept trying until you got it right." His observation cut deeper than he realized. I'd spent my entire life terrified of being wrong, because being wrong meant proving my parents right about me. But in this new world I was creating, being wrong just meant I hadn't learned something yet. There was no shame in it, only opportunity. The next semester, I took 6 classes and worked 28 hours a week at a tiny computer firm to pay my bills. Sleep became an unaffordable luxury. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, studying in every spare moment between work and school. Marcus Grant, the owner, noticed my dedication. He had started the firm in his garage 6 years ago and grew it with pure, raw persistence, a path I recognized in myself. "You're going to burn out if you keep this pace," he warned me one evening when he found me debugging code at 1:10 a.m. "I can't afford to slow down," I explained simply. "I'm making up for lost time." Lost time from what? I offered a truncated version of my story, the family that had abandoned me, my sister in prison, and the decision that had cost me everything while simultaneously giving me everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, his gaze growing contemplative. After I finished, he sat back in his chair and nodded once. "My parents wanted me to be a doctor," he confided. "Traditional, prestigious, honorable. I dropped out of medical school to write code in my garage. They didn't speak to me for 3 years. Did they ever come around? Eventually, but by then I'd realized I no longer needed their approval," he said, waving a hand around the thriving office of the firm he'd built. "This is mine. They can accept it or not. Either way, it exists." That exchange changed how I viewed my own journey. I'd been running from my family's judgment, trying to prove them wrong. Marcus showed me an alternative, creating something so real that their opinions became meaningless. Within a year, I had transferred to Portland State University on a full scholarship. I kept working part-time at Marcus's software company, analyzing code, learning everything I could. "You're wasting your time doing grunt work," he told me after I solved a problem that had stumped their top developers for weeks. "I'm moving you to the development team." The development team was 7 people, all with computer science degrees from prestigious universities. I was the only community college transfer, the only one who started coding after turning 26. The only woman. Brandon Cole, my new boss, made his skepticism clear early on. "Marcus likes to give people chances," he told me after my first team meeting. "But this is professional-grade work. If you can't keep up, speak up before you bring down the whole team." I kept my mouth shut and my head down, letting my work speak for itself. When Brandon Cole assigned me what he clearly thought was a tedious task, documenting historical code that no one wanted to touch, I discovered 3 critical security flaws hidden deep within the old routines. Marcus called an emergency meeting after I submitted my report. If exploited by the wrong people, those vulnerabilities could have cost the company millions. I not only found them, but also provided elegant solutions that would patch the holes without disrupting existing functionality. Brandon Cole's expression as Marcus praised my work in front of the entire company was almost worth the restless hours I'd spent poring over the code. "Good catch," Brandon Cole mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "Just doing my job," I said evenly. But something had shifted. The other developers began approaching me with questions, asking for my input on design decisions, including me in informal chats around the coffee machine. I was becoming a member of the team, earning respect, one challenge at a time. My social life, such as it was, primarily consisted of study groups and coworkers. I'd learned to be alone in my family, and that skill translated well into my newfound freedom. But there was a difference between voluntary solitude and forced isolation. Maya Collins from my database management class invited me to a party at her place. I almost said no. Parties were never my thing, but something made me accept. The gathering was small, about 14 people, mostly computer science students. They talked about code, theory, and argued politely about the best programming languages. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where I understood the conversation and could contribute meaningfully. "You're the one who found those security flaws at Chen's firm, right?" a man named Jordan Pierce asked. I heard about it through the internship network. Pretty amazing. People were talking about my work. I was impressed with something I had done. The novelty of it made me almost giddy. I started accepting more invitations. Coffee with Maya Collins, lunch with Kevin O'Connor, happy hour with the development team. Building a social network from scratch was difficult and uncomfortable, but it was also mine, based on who I truly was, rather than who I was expected to be. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, became an unexpected friend. She reminded me of what a mother could be: engaged, supportive, critical when needed, and always kind. She showed me how to cook real food, not just ramen and pre-made meals. "You're too thin," she'd say, arriving at my door one Saturday with bags of groceries. "Come on, I'm showing you how to make lasagna." Her kitchen was warm and messy, the product of a long life. Photos of children and grandchildren adorned the refrigerator. Plants thrived on every windowsill. She moved around the space with ease, pulling out pans and ingredients, explaining each step. "Cooking is chemistry," she explained. "You understand coding. You can understand this." She was right. Following a recipe was like following an algorithm: precise quantities, defined steps, predictable results. I approached learning with the same fervor I did everything else. While we waited for the lasagna to bake, Helen Gallagher mentioned her granddaughter had gone to college for computer science. "She's doing quite well. Works at a big company in Silicon Valley. Are you close to her?" Helen Gallagher's face flashed with sadness. "Not as close as I'd like. She's busy. I'm old. That's life." "You're not old," I gently reminded her. "You're teaching me to make lasagna." She chuckled and rubbed my hand. "Claire Bennett, you're wonderful for my ego. I'm glad you moved next door." The statement struck a raw nerve. Someone was glad I existed in their space. It was such a simple thing, yet I had never experienced it before. The lasagna came out perfectly. Helen Gallagher sent me home with half of it and promised to make bread from scratch the next week. My parents called a few times that first year. I changed my phone number, yet they somehow kept finding my new contact information. I never responded, letting their increasingly irate voicemails pile up before deleting them in batches. Then, about 16 months after I moved to Portland, Mom caught me in a moment of weakness. I just finished a grueling exam and wasn't paying attention when I answered an unfamiliar number. Her voice on the other end was strained with rage. "Scarlett writes to us about how bad jail is. She cries every day. She's having panic attacks. The other inmates are abusive to her, and you continue to live your life as if nothing has happened. She hit someone with her car and left them to die on the street." I replied softly, my voice cold and professional. "Mrs. Evelyn Parker spent 3 months in the hospital. She still cannot walk without assistance. Please tell me more about Scarlett's jail experience. You could have avoided all of this." Mom's voice crackled. "One small sacrifice. That is all we asked. You wanted me to go to prison for a crime I did not commit. You said I was trashy, unattractive, and useless in comparison to her. You wanted me to throw away my life because you believed hers was more valuable. So I made a decision, too. I picked myself. You are not the girl I raised." "Good," I said. "Your daughter was miserable." I hung up and blocked the number. That was 3 years ago, and I haven't communicated with them since. 2 months ago, I received a message on LinkedIn from James Callahan. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then, I remembered Scarlett's fiancé, James, with whom she had purportedly planned a future. His message was brief. "I hope this gets to you. I know we have never met. I wanted you to know that I ended my engagement to your sister about 7 months after her conviction. Your parents told her you'd been lying about what happened that night and had sabotaged her out of envy. I want you to know that I never believed them. I contacted Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family and learned the facts. I apologized for everything you went through. You did the correct thing." I stared at the message for a long time. The vindication felt distant, as if it happened to someone else. I'd stopped seeking their approval years before, but I responded nonetheless. "Thank you for reaching out. I hope you are well." His reply arrived an hour later. "I married someone else 2 years ago. She is a public defender. Works with people the system fails. Meeting her helped me understand why you took that decision. Some things are more important than familial loyalty." I grinned at that. A stranger's husband understood me more than my own parents ever did. The years in Portland changed me in ways I'm still discovering. After struggling through community college, I transferred to Portland State and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. The girl who had barely finished high school now had a 3.8 GPA and job offers from 3 different firms. I decided to stay with Marcus Grant. Loyalty was important to me, and he gave me a chance when I was nobody. 2 years after graduation, I was promoted to lead developer at Marcus's firm, which had grown from a scrappy startup to a real contender in the cybersecurity industry. My income had reached 6 figures. I bought a small house in a quiet neighborhood with a garden I was learning to tend. Tomatoes, it turned out, were much harder to grow than code. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, a retired teacher, gave me flower garden cuttings and told me about composting. She knew nothing about my family, Scarlett, jail, or the decision I had made. To her, I was simply Claire Bennett, the quiet young woman next door who occasionally needed help identifying weeds. "You have good instincts," she told me one Saturday morning while we worked in my garden. "The soil was completely depleted when you bought the place. Look at it now." I examined the dark, rich earth streaming between my fingertips. Something that had died was brought back to life through careful work. The metaphor was not lost on me. Scarlett was freed on parole last week. She had completed 4 years of her 5-year term with credit for good behavior. I knew because she had somehow found my email address and sent me a message. The subject line said, "We need to talk." The email itself was lengthy and meandering, alternating between fury and self-pity. She had lost her invitation to graduate school. James had abandoned her. She had a criminal record, making work practically impossible. Our parents had spent their retirement funds on legal expenses and appeals. And somehow, it was all my fault. "You ruined my life because you were jealous," she wrote. "You constantly resented the fact that I was prettier, smarter, and more accomplished. You saw one opportunity to tear me down and grabbed it. I made an error. People make errors, but you had a choice. You decided to be nasty." I read it 3 times, waiting for an emotion to surface. Anger, guilt, satisfaction, anything. But there remained only a faint recollection of who she had always been, and who I had ultimately ceased being. I carefully composed my response. "Scarlett, you were driving intoxicated. You struck a 66-year-old woman in the crosswalk and drove away as she lay bleeding on the pavement. Mrs. Evelyn Parker survived, but she will never fully recover. She had to relearn how to walk. She is still in chronic pain, and her medical bills have bankrupted her family's savings. Our parents asked me to go to prison for your crime, telling me that I was worthless, ugly, and that my life was less important than yours. They asked me to give up my freedom so you could keep your opportunities. I refused. That is the extent of my crime against you. You believe you deserve special treatment because your parents spent your entire life telling you that you were exceptional, but you're not. You're just someone who made a bad decision and had to pay for it. I sincerely hope you rebuild your life. But you'll have to do it the same way I did mine, through hard work, accountability, and the understanding that no one owes you anything just because you want it. I will not answer any future emails. I wish you the best, but I am no longer a part of your life." I emailed it, and then quickly blocked her address. Then I blocked my parents' emails, cutting off the final threads that connected us. The relief was profound. 3 days ago, I received a letter in certified mail. There was no return address, but the postmark indicated it came from Ohio. Inside was a handwritten message from my father. "Claire Bennett, your mother is quite unwell. The doctors think she does not have much time left. She is begging for you. Whatever your complaints are with this family, she is still your mother. She reared you, nourished you, and provided you with a home. You owe her at least one visit. Put aside your pride and do the right thing, Dad." I held the letter for a long time, sitting on my porch swing as the dusk light faded over my garden. Helen Gallagher was watering her flowers next door, singing something tuneless but happy. The dying woman was not my mother in any way that truly counted. She ceased being that the moment she looked at me coldly and decided I was disposable. Our biological tie was only a genetic fluke, no more substantial than sharing a blood type with a stranger. I considered the mother I wished to have, the one who would have protected both of her children, who would have had Scarlett face her penalties while still offering love and support, and who saw value in both of us. That mother had never existed. I had finally accepted that reality. I walked inside and wrote a quick answer. "Dad, I hope Mom receives the care she requires. I will not be visiting. Claire Bennett." I sent it the next morning. For weeks later, another certified letter arrived. I knew exactly what it would say before I opened it. The funeral notification was simple and conventional. My mother passed away. Services would be conducted in the church where I was christened as an infant, which I hadn't visited in almost a decade. I was listed as a survivor, as if I had been present in her life. I placed the notification into the recycling bin and went to work. Yesterday, Marcus Grant summoned me to his office. I was working on a significant security contract that had the potential to propel the organization to new heights. My work was precise, identifying difficulties before they arose and fixing them with elegant efficiency. Marcus Grant smiled as he continued. The client was impressed. They want you to lead the implementation team. It's a promotion, a large raise, and your own department. We spoke about the specifics for an hour. This role would make me one of the company's youngest department heads. The salary was ludicrous, something I'd never considered applying to my life. I accepted on the spot. Walking back to my car, I called Dr. Allison Walsh. She'd become a friend over the years, and I checked in with her quarterly to report my progress and ask advice. I told her I'd received the promotion. Her pleased giggle filled the phone. I knew you would. You've earned it 1,000 times over. She paused. I keep thinking about our first encounter in your office, when you told me I had aptitude. You did. You do, she continued, her voice growing softer. I've seen many students pass through my programs. Very few of them possess your brains and determination. But I have observed something. The people that accomplish the most are frequently those who have something to prove. You had more to prove than most. I don't anymore, I realized as I spoke it aloud for the first time. I'm not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'm simply living. That's when you've truly won, Dr. Allison Walsh replied softly. We spoke for a little longer before saying goodbye. I drove home through Portland's nighttime traffic, watching the city lights turn on against the darkening sky. My phone was buzzing with texts from coworkers congratulating me. Plans for a celebratory dinner were already underway. I thought of Scarlett in Ohio, freshly paroled and presumably trying to find work with her record, living with our father in the house where we grew up. Mom had passed away 4 weeks ago, and she was buried without my presence. I imagined Dad alone with the daughter he tried to save and the one he'd discarded. And all I felt was a distant optimism that they'd eventually come to terms with their decisions, just as I had. My house gleamed warmly as I pulled into the driveway. Helen Gallagher waved from her porch, saying something about bringing zucchini bread tomorrow. Inside, my home office was filled with proof of my actual life. Framed degrees, work awards, and photos of coworkers who had become friends. There are no family photographs. I stopped displaying them years ago. I prepared dinner and worked in my garden until the light faded entirely. The tomatoes were finally flourishing, laden with fruit that would ripen in the coming weeks. I'd learned patience with them, seeing that progress could not be rushed, but rather encouraged and given time. My phone vibrated one last time. An email sent from an unknown address. I almost deleted it before reading it, but something compelled me to open it. Miss Claire Bennett, my name is Natalie Parker. My mother was the victim of the hit and run that involved your sister. I wanted to reach out because my mother had asked me to contact you. She read about your sister's release in the press and wanted to tell you something. She wants you to know that she has forgiven your sister for what transpired. But more than that, she wanted me to tell you that your story, your honesty about what occurred that night, restored her trust in humans. She had been suffering with wrath and resentment, believing that justice did not exist. Learning that someone had chosen truth above familial loyalty, even at tremendous personal sacrifice, aided her recovery in ways that medicine could not. My mother is now 74. She is still in pain and needs a cane, but she is at peace with it. She wanted you to know that your choice was important to her and that it helped. Thank you for your integrity. Sincerely, Natalie Parker. I read it 3 times. Tears obscured the words and surprised me with their ferocity. I hadn't cried about anything in years, but these weren't tears of sorrow or rage. They represented something cleaner, almost like finality. I wrote back, Dear Natalie, please tell your mother that her note meant more than she knows. I hope she continues to heal. I hope she has many happy years ahead. Thank you for reaching out. With thanks, Claire Bennett. I submitted it and shut my laptop. The house was calm around me, full of the life I had created from nothing. There is no family legacy, no parental support, and no sister's shadow to live in. Just my own work, my own decisions, and my steadfast refusal to accept their interpretation of who I was meant to be. I moved through my house, shutting out lights and closing doors in preparation for sleep. In my bedroom, I saw my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back was not awful. It had never been unattractive. It was all mine, lived in and earned with challenges my family would never comprehend because they hadn't bothered to witness them. Tomorrow, I'd go to work and begin establishing my new department. I'd hire people who showed promise in the same way Marcus Grant and Dr. Allison Walsh saw it in me. I'd make something worthwhile with nothing but hard work and vision. My phone was now quiet. No more letters from Ohio. No more guilt trips or manipulations. My mother was gone, buried without my tears. My father had reclaimed Scarlett, the daughter he had chosen. They could rebuild any connection they wanted without my interfering. Helen Gallagher's zucchini bread might appear at some point. Work would be difficult and fulfilling. My garden would require maintenance. My existence would continue, constructed on my own foundations and nourished by the effort I decided to make. They wanted me to give up everything for Scarlett because they believed I was worth less. Instead, I walked away and realized how much I was worth when assessed by my own standards, rather than theirs. The math worked out better than they could have dreamed. I got into bed and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, like someone who had finally let go of a burden she was never meant to bear. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new wins, and new proof that the person they discarded was precisely the person who ought to be retained. And that, I thought, as I drifted off to sleep, was the finest justice of all. I hope my story touched some of you. It has been a long road, and it's still ongoing. I would love to hear your opinions. Have you ever had to choose yourself above your family's expectations, or leave a relationship that was holding you back? Tell me what you think in the comment section. I genuinely want to know.